Great, thank you very much for coming. I'm Adrian York. The title of my talk today is Post-Jazz Praxis, Interactions between the Audience and Performers. And I can start off, what is the post-jazz praxis? Well, if you take just kind of crude economic data, we can see that the jazz market is in decline. There is no real solid definition of what post-jazz is. But I suppose what I'm positing is the proposal that could move away from the kind of paradigm where you have the brilliant soloist standing up and being admired, and soloists take it in turns to do fantastic solos, the audience applauds, but maybe that's its day, and we're going to move into a new world. That's what I'm investigating. Anyway, who am I? I've done all those things. Now I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Westminster, doing a practice-based PhD at the same uni, because I don't have time to do it anywhere else, and they would have me. So as I said, there's a decline in the market. There's also an ubiquity of an audience familiarity with digital technologies, because it's very much a digital space that I'm working within. There's a spread of interactive experiential practice through popular culture, and there's also a culture of mistrust of expertise that I think kind of plays into the interactive world that we're moving into now. So I'm working in the field of interactive musical participation, described by Hurdle, Kayali and Fitzpatrick as being when a spectator can take part, or at least make a contribution in a live concert through a technically driven system. That's what's at the heart of my work. Influences are Chris Small. Music is not a thing at all, but an activity, something that people do. But small stakeholders are often passive and not active players in this space. The research is also informed by Cook, who lists a series of principles for designing computer music controllers, but paradoxically he suggests that you should make a piece, not an instrument or a controller, which is what I've decided to do, and actually working within quite a conservative music frame, rather than doing anything kind of too radical or interesting or way out, because there's a lot of people doing that stuff, so I thought I would reclaim the boring conservative space. Also very much influenced by music electronica viva from the 60s in Italy, who set to liberate the audience. If the composer had become one with the player had become one with the listener. We are all musicians, we are all creators, and Frederick Brzeski is kind of a major player in that. So, how do we create meaningful interactive musical participation? Well, by creating a dialogue between the audience, the performers, the technology, and the composer. And there we have it. Everyone interacting and everything interacting with each other. So for my research, for my PhD, the key gap in knowledge is to try to apply interactive musical participation to an existing genre, specifically to jazz, style of music that embodies improvisory behaviour and interactivity. And I think what's interesting about this Verkava quote, which I think is great, it talks about the need to consider music in a digital musical culture as a transformative praxis. She said, by examining the ways in which music is produced and using digital music culture, we can prepare for new forms of artistry that have yet to emerge from the creative mosaic and of digital appropriation. So that's what I'm attempting to do. Now, Lee and Freeman have developed 5 criteria to enable successful audience participation, to make participation easy, to collect gestures from the audience and turn them into a single musical composition, to drive audiences to start participation without reservation, and to motivate people to participate and to sustain the interest. Finally, to provide a clear relationship between their gestures and outcome in music. So these are quite tough to deliver, and this is what I've been kind of investigating to see if that was possible. So I had a pilot study, it was a tune I called rather doomily, the Singularity, which was performed at the University of Music Conference in London in 2017. It has a very traditional jazz structure, an A-B-A, 32-bar form. There was one performer, moi, 5 audience participants, one on an iPhone who was kind of changing the structure of the piece, 4 on Wii controllers who were actually making some noise. And I was interacting with them, so we were sort of starting to test out some of the ideas. It was a way of testing the technical infrastructure and really importantly developing some novel performance protocols. There was also a sort of AI element with piano voicings which had been randomly assigned using Schwarzenegger, a plugin that sort of works in Ableton Live. Just a quick plug, all that is will be written up and is coming out in a book. It's a chapter, Innovation in Music, Performance, Production, Technology and Business, being published by Routledge. When? Do you know?
Start of the new year.
Start of the new year. So it'll be on next year's Christmas list.
Yeah.
So there's the Singularity. You can see it's a kind of very traditional structure. Maybe the harmonies aren't sort of traditional jazz harmonies, but and so what can audience performers, what can they control? Well, things like dynamics, panning, equalization and filtering. They can trigger new sonic events, sounds and parts. They can change the tempo. They can trigger time-based effects. So there's a lot of different options. And I had a very simple technical setup. My laptop running Ableton Live and oscillator. The Wii's communicating via Bluetooth. And the iPhone running TouchOSC. So that was kind of just a kind of very simple technical setup, but it worked. Performance went pretty well. I learned a lot from it. The idea was to then do some further research, the development, composition and performance of a new larger scale piece. That's what I'm in the middle of working on at the moment. And if the tech works, we'll be able to play. I have enough time to play around with that a bit. And integrate the performance protocol data gleaned from the performance of the Singularity, and also really importantly to increase the scale of participation, because that's always the big bugbear with these things. It's easy to do what I did initially. It's not so straightforward to have lots of people participating. So how do you scale up? How do you get more people in the room involved? Well, the kind of big idea really is to use audiences' smartphones as distributed sound sources, triggering sounds from a bespoke app. So Dr. Rob Tolston there is very kindly going to do a little bit of programming for me and create an app, and I will create samples which will be put in the app, so the audience can then download the app and they can trigger sounds that have been designed specifically for a particular piece. And you know, I've experienced those kind of distributed sound with phones before, with people doing bird song. It can create really beautiful effects. The account people have been working a lot in that area. Also increasing the amount of games controllers being used, directly controlling sonic events from the host computer. So I've got 3 set up at the moment. There's one sort of Wii instrument which is called Glissando, one called Arpeggiate, one called Vibes. Also using proximity and touch to trigger sounds and effects. So there'll be things in the room that if you go near, that's going to trigger sounds, and if you touch them, do the same. So that's the way of scaling up. The new project is called Go Deeper. So what did I learn, and how have I taken that forward into the new project? Well, so if I could, AS, that stands for audience soloists. So I found that pitch contributions were problematic over a complex harmonic framework. So simple solution, and one which kind of works in quite a lot of popular music context, is to use a modal harmonic approach, so that melodic elements triggered can function across the harmonic structure of the whole piece. So I created the composition using the Dorian mode. I found that rhythmic stuff, if it wasn't synced, which it wasn't, kind of wouldn't sit with the track. So it may seem obvious, but you kind of have to do this stuff to kind of find out the obvious. And you can have sounds with gentle attack envelopes to avoid rhythmic incompatibility, or if you have sampled lines that people are triggering, generate melodic lines that are rubato in nature and aren't reliant on being in time. So for instance, tremolandi work very well as a gesture because they're not fixed in a strict tempo. And also it was important to create sonic textures for people to solo on top of that allowed the audience to be able to recognise their contributions, because I created music that was too complicated. So actually, by stripping it down, it creates a situation where people can press a button and hear what they're doing and get a real feel of connection to their contribution. So all those things have been sort of important. So project, as I say, is halfway through at the moment. Where it's going, I need to add some vocal chants and create my own vocal samples, map the vocal samples into the app, do some performances, maybe add some AI elements. Beyond that, the further research, I want to do some work in a non-metered time frame with acoustic performers, but with electronic sounds being triggered by the audience. I want to sync rhythmic contributions with sequence material in a process of distributed synchronized playback. That technology seems to be sort of on the verge of becoming accessible. I'm not a programmer, so I'm not going to make this stuff happen. I'm interested in working with what's there and exploring the practice of it. And then sort of spread audience and performers across a performance space using multi-speakers setup. So those are some ideas for the future. My challenges that I've had within the process have been my assumptions about participants' abilities, making sure that I give clear instructions to people, making any sample musical motifs short, simple and easy to understand, so that I've found sometimes that people have triggered things, they're almost a bit scared that they're making sound when they can hear it. So you give them something that's almost over before they've got a chance to think about it, and then they get used to the process. But things that are too long and complicated, you know, I was putting in some good licks, and it was like, no, this is too much. And balancing the tension between participants' freedom of expression and being able to control the space, actually, because there needs to be some level of control over the freedom. Balancing the solo elements and collective performance, and making sure that any musician soloist is enabling the audience performance, which is again an idea that very much comes from the Music Electronica Viva ethos, about the kind of professional musician enabling the audience performers. So that's me. I'm going to sort of move out of that mode now into hopefully making some music. How much time do I have?
5 minutes. 5, 7.
Okay, well, let's see if I can manage that. Oops. And so, Wi-Fi keeps coming back, but here we go. So, here's a section of the track, which hopefully will work. No.
You need to set what you're, I can see from here, you need to set, you haven't got an output set, I don't think.
I'll just check my live preferences. Let's do now. Let's see if that sorts it out. It was set earlier, but it's still. Okay, so here are some wee instruments. Do we have a volunteer? Okay, let's not stand up.
Oh, I don't have to stand
You don't have to stand up.
Sure, yeah.
So, here's a Wii controller. Everyone familiar with it? You familiar with it? Yeah. All the buttons trigger sound apart from that. Don't switch the panel. Okay. There's one on the back as well.
Just movement control anyway.
Not on that one.
Oh.
No. So each of them kind of shows off different things. And all I'd say to you is, when you hold the button down, let the gesture finish.
Okay.
And then what we'll do is, you'll do a gesture, and then I'll respond to you. Okay? And then you'll do another one, and I'll respond to that. So let me just assume my position, and so actually, how's
This
this
is the
been?
easiest gig I've ever done.
He says.
Yeah, hold on.
Okay, here we go.
I thought you were going to go first.
You go first.
Already running to front.
Right, lovely. Thank you. So, we have another volunteer. Yeah. So, this instrument it's quite challenging for me as the improviser. So, this is called arpeggiate. Yeah. Again, don't switch the power off. Don't switch hit that one. But any of these other buttons you can do. So this is an interesting dynamic for me because it creates the kind of patterns that you don't get in contemporary jazz. So I'm probably you're going to do much better than me on this. So I've got to kind of respond to this. You get the idea. So, one more of these. Final victim. Anyone? Come. Yeah, come on. Okay, so all you have to do is press button 1 and move it up and down. Okay. So here we go. Okay. Good. I'm pulling his eyebrows. Those are the audience soloists. Now, you know, each of those has their own atmospheres and possibilities and potentials, and I'll be developing those more. But obviously, we talked about having the app, downloading lots of samples, which will be specifically composed for the piece. So imagine you have your app, you open it up, there's 25 buttons to press, and each one triggers a different sample. So I've tried to model that here using the launch pad. I'm sure it's going to work. Okay, good. Yeah. So what I've done is I've triggered just very basic samples, but within the scale mode. So would someone like to come and play this?
Me?
Yeah, come on.
I
just need the front.
like watching people's faces when they're doing it. It's such fun.
Well, so the idea is, here you have these 25 buttons, just 5 by 5 here, yeah? So you can press several at once, one at once, and
If you hold it down, does it make a difference?
no, just hit them.
They're all quite slow in response.
Right, thank you. So obviously these are kind of random samples which bear no relation really to music, but just to give the idea of the concept, that samples that are specifically designed for the music will give a different result. The singer's coming back from Zimbabwe next week, going to record her, and hopefully we'll get something quite exciting to put together which we can perform in a few weeks' time. That's it. Thank you very much for your time and your contributions. If you've got any questions.
Thank you.
Well, maybe I shouldn't say. It's less a question, maybe some advice, which is to say, I wondered whether one of the things that could make it, just having just been a co-performer, or whatever you want to call it, I wondered whether a more useful way of doing it, so that, you know, it felt for me like the problem was that the core musical materials did change. That was static, right? And I wondered whether a way of making that feel more flexible without having to like radically change things is to create an effects rack where, as you move a parameter, you know, with the chain across the top, that goes and selects a whole different possible set of effects that create radical changes, let's say in the rhythm, which might mean that the pulse stays exactly the same, but you can change a bit more.
I've got a whole pile of different parts of the music set up which can be triggered, and that's the idea, to have different backings for different situations, and some of them using filters and all, with sample and hold and all that kind of rhythmic stuff. So this was very much just a kind of narrow focus. There's going to be a whole
because like with the tremolo one, you could totally move in like a massive chain, sliding down loads of different effects, and be like, oh, if I hold it just here, it's like the really coarse timbres away, you know. No, you know, this isn't the finished. Cool.
This is really just to show the basic concepts at this stage. Any other questions? Yeah.
Just a quick one, really. I mean, you're speaking about interactive musical participation and everything. So I'm just wondering where you see the audience member from being someone who starts to utilise the tool you're given as actually being a performer, and where you find that distinction. Because in terms of like traditional performer, like performer audience interaction in jazz, I mean, even something like an elation from the crowd that gets someone to perform in a more like pronounced way and stuff. So just trying to see like where you see them as a performer, as an audience member, and
well, I think with this research, it's about blurring the boundaries, you know, and it's about creating a non-traditional model that deconstructs the hierarchies that have been present for a long time, and that it's and that's what's interesting about it for me. The old model you know, it's worth investigating some new models because the old model is dying.
Do you think you're like imposing upon the audience to perform in a particular way as well? So it's almost like you are giving, it's sort of democratised, but you're giving an audience member a specific set of things to do, which specifically relate to your preconceived idea of how they can affect the performance.
Yeah, I think, you know, there's a balance between, as I said, there's always that tension between the freedom you allow the audience, but you're dealing often with, what I've learned is that people come to it with different skills and abilities. So the simpler you make it, actually, and the more predetermined, in a sense, the better it is. But there still is some, you know, quite a lot of element of freedom within that as well. And that people learn through the process as they, you know, once they're a few seconds in, they start to kind of build some skill, a skill set, actually, which they can then helps them kind of get more confident with the process. It's, you know, it's investigating this to see if it's possible, really, but I can envisage situations where maybe artists, or maybe myself in my own practice, you know, will have a tune where they invite the audience to participate, either through creating kind of ambient textures through their phones, or having some people who are going to kind of engage with the performance in some way. Or there could be, you know, installation type events. It's just to investigate it, really. It's research.
Cool.
Anyone else? Cool. Thank you very much.
The University of Huddersfield, inspiring tomorrow's professionals.